The day began with the sound of pounding fists on my grandfather's front door, echoing through the house like the thud of a gavel delivering a sentence. My grandpa, a quiet man who had lived on this land since long before the neighborhood sprouted around it, shuffled to the porch with steady steps. Waiting there in the blazing morning sun was Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, clutching a thick folder under one arm and waving a clipboard like a sword. Her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes as she declared, "Congratulations. As of today, your property has been annexed into the HOA. You owe dues, and you'll be expected to comply immediately with our codes." I froze at the kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, stunned by her audacity. This was his land, purchased decades ago, with deeds signed and recorded long before Karen's HOA ever existed. Grandpa looked at her with the kind of calm patience that could weather hurricanes. "Ma'am," he said softly, "this home is not and never will be under your association. You have no claim here." But Karen only sneered, jabbing the clipboard into his chest like a weapon. "You don't get a choice. Every property within 3 miles is under our governance now. Refuse, and we'll fine you into bankruptcy. And if that doesn't work, I'll have the sheriff drag you out myself." My blood boiled as I rushed outside, but Grandpa raised his hand, silencing me with a look. He stood straighter, his voice carrying a weight that silenced even the birds. "You'd better think carefully about what you're saying." Karen laughed, a shrill, ugly sound. "What are you going to do? Call your lawyer? Sue us? You're just an old man on a dying patch of land. I own this neighborhood now." She pulled out her phone and dialed 911, announcing loudly for all to hear that she had a hostile trespasser refusing HOA orders on her hands. Neighbors peeked out from their porches, watching the show, some whispering, some shaking their heads. Within minutes, the wail of sirens pierced the morning calm. A patrol car pulled up, 2 deputies stepping out. Karen ran to them like she was leading a parade, shrieking, "Arrest him. He refuses to pay HOA dues and recognize our authority." One of the deputies looked baffled. "Ma'am, that's not a criminal matter." But Karen wouldn't let up, insisting she had legal authority and that my grandfather was defying community law. The deputies turned to Grandpa, waiting for his explanation. He took a slow breath, then reached into his jacket pocket. What he pulled out caught the sunlight in a way that made everyone lean in. It was a small leather badge case, worn from years of use. With steady hands, he flipped it open, revealing the unmistakable glint of a federal emblem. The crowd gasped. The deputies stiffened instantly, their hands rising in respect. Karen blinked, stumbling backward as if the sight of the badge had physically struck her. What is that supposed to be?" she stammered, her bravado cracking. Grandpa's eyes locked on hers, sharp as steel. "It means I spent my life serving this country in a federal capacity. It means I know exactly what real authority looks like. And it sure as hell isn't you waving around a clipboard and making false claims." His words rang out like cannon fire, silencing the street. The deputies nodded, one even saying, "Sir, we apologize for the disturbance." Karen's face turned crimson. "He's faking. That badge can't be real. He's trying to trick you." But before she could ramble further, a new voice cut through the tension. An SUV pulled up, and out stepped a man in a suit with a briefcase. He introduced himself as a federal investigator from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, explaining that Karen's HOA had already been flagged for multiple complaints of harassment, false annexation attempts, and fraudulent billing. We've been waiting for first-hand evidence, he said, lifting a recording device. And this little scene just provided it. The neighbors gasped again, whispers rippling through the crowd like wildfire. Some clutched their mouths in shock. Others muttered that they knew Karen had gone too far. She flailed, insisting it was a misunderstanding, that she was protecting property values, that she had every right to expand jurisdiction. But her words were nothing but desperate noise now, drowned out by the sound of her empire crumbling in real time. Grandpa closed his badge and tucked it away. But the image lingered in every mind on that street, an old man, underestimated and dismissed, standing tall with the weight of truth behind him. Karen, who had bullied, fined, and threatened her way into power, now looked like nothing more than a desperate fraudster cornered by her own arrogance. The investigator's words seemed to hang in the air like thunder after lightning. And for the first time, Karen's mask of authority cracked into something raw fear. She waved her clipboard frantically, shouting, "This isn't fair. You can't just come here and say I've broken the law. I'm the HOA president. Everyone here answers to me." Her voice, once sharp enough to make neighbors flinch, now sounded shrill and hollow. The very people she had bullied stepped further into the street, emboldened by the badge they had just seen and the presence of federal authority. One by one, they began speaking out. A woman from 2 doors down shouted, "You fined me for having flowers that weren't regulation color." A man across the cul-de-sac added, "You threatened to tow my truck even though it was parked in my own driveway." Another neighbor raised his phone and announced loudly, "I've recorded her threatening us for months. I'm ready to hand it over." The crowd was no longer silent. They were witnesses, rising together like a tide. Karen's face drained of color as the federal investigator scribbled notes and asked for copies of evidence. She tried to push through the neighbors to get to her SUV, but the deputies moved in, blocking her escape. One of them told her calmly but firmly, "You're not under arrest right now, ma'am, but you will remain here while we complete this report." The humiliation painted across her face was something I'll never forget. For years, she had made others feel small. Now it was her turn to shrink under the weight of accountability. Grandpa didn't gloat. He didn't smirk or lash out. He simply straightened his shoulders, his voice calm but unyielding. Power doesn't come from fear, Karen. It comes from service, sacrifice, and respect. You've confused control for leadership, and today you've learned the difference. His words struck harder than any insult, because they were true, undeniable, and spoken with the authority of a man who had lived his entire life in the service of something greater than himself. The federal agent then announced something none of us expected. Karen's HOA charter was being suspended pending investigation. That meant no more fines, no more threats, no more fake annexations. The neighbors erupted in cheers. Some hugged each other. Others clapped. And more than a few let tears slip free after years of feeling trapped. The power that had strangled this community was gone in an instant, ripped out from under Karen's feet. She sank onto the curb, her clipboard slipping from her hand, her empire of paper rules scattered by the wind. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was swift. Karen was charged with multiple counts of fraud, false reporting, and harassment. She lost her position permanently, barred from serving in any HOA or community leadership role ever again. The HOA itself dissolved after members resigned in disgrace, unable to defend the mess she had created. Her name became a cautionary tale, whispered in grocery store aisles and retold at barbecues, the woman who thought she ruled everything, undone by her own lies. But something more powerful grew in the ashes of her downfall. Without her oppressive grip, neighbors began to trust one another again. They organized community dinners, fixed fences together, and laughed without fear of citations. Kids played ball in the street, porches filled with conversation. And for the first time in years, the neighborhood felt alive. Grandpa became a quiet hero, not because of the badge he revealed, but because of the dignity with which he carried himself through the storm. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the lake beyond the houses glowed with fire and gold, I sat beside him on the porch. He sipped his coffee, watching children run with kites. "You know," he said softly, "she thought she could strip us of our rights with a clipboard and a rulebook. But the truth always outlasts fear. Always." His words sank deep, as timeless as the land beneath our feet. Karen had come that day to force an old man into her world of control. Instead, she walked away exposed, disgraced, and powerless. And in her fall, a community rose again, reminded that respect can't be demanded, only earned. Now I turn to you. Was Karen's downfall the justice she deserved? Or do you believe it went too far? If you were standing there that day, watching her world collapse, would you have spoken out or stayed silent? Share your thoughts, because silence feeds tyranny. But truth survives only when voices rise.